Oh, it's good to be back. Welcome back to the Tectonic Takes podcast. I know it's been a while since you heard from me, but it hasn't been quite as long since you heard from Abram. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. As you know, you had to wake me up from a nap to get me here. But my alarm didn't go off. It ran long. All those excuses. But I'm happy to be here now, so that's what matters.
All right. Today was a good day for me. Today was the first day of classes for the new semester at SF State, so now I'm back to teaching both at SF State and College of Marin for another semester since College of Marin starts a week before SF State, but there's a good chance no one watching this podcast has attended either college. But if you have, that's great. But we have a very surprising result. Arguably more surprising than beating Necaxa. Probably not as surprising as beating them 5-0. But we went into the worst named stadium in Major League Soccer, formerly Rio Tinto Stadium, in beautiful Sandy, Utah, and we beat Real Salt Lake 2-0. 2-0. Abram, initial thoughts.
I mean, it's a huge result. It's too bad they didn't come earlier in the season. This is a very good RSL team, so it's not anything to sneeze at. I'm very proud of the boys because they definitely showed their worth and their quality at that game.
Yeah, they absolutely did. This is a complete result. Uh, does losing to us disqualify you from winning the league? Of course not, because it didn't disqualify LAFC in 2022. But I know Real Salt Lake is feeling pretty salty about that. I had to talk to my boy Hayden, our friend from the Royal Rap podcast. He was not happy initially the way he was live tweeting the game, and he had a tweet where he's like, "We lost to the worst team in the league at home," and then I replied saying, "Worst team in the league and round of 16 participant at the League's Cup." Address us correctly, Hayden. But GG. Okay, we got the overreaction out of the way because I don't think it needs repeating. If you're listening to this podcast, you're well aware we're not making the playoffs this season. So this win will not help us get there, but it is a very important evaluation period. Is Ian Russell the guy? Which of these players are going to be there in this new era, whether it's going to be Ian Russell or whether we go a different route in 2025? We saw today that both Ian Russell and Christian Espinoza made the team of the week. And my question going into this is if this is the pair of manager and star player that will appear at the beginning and the start of next season. Did this match really change your opinion on Ian Russell?
Uh, Not really. I mean, so my opinion has been kind of that he's been dealt a really tough hand. I think that if we can like get linked to a coach with a great pedigree, then I would be inclined to wish for us to go that way because I actually don't make the decisions that matter. So, but I mean I think that he's a competent coach and all things considered, I don't have a problem with him staying. Um, just if we were linked with someone better, then by all means, I think that would be a great choice. But I also don't really see that as a realistic expectation for the Quakes. So
Pochettino's off the table, unfortunately.
yeah, I'd be happy to see Ian stay. But also, if something happens, then I would also be happy to see him step aside. So it really depends on the context.
Yeah, so I'm a diehard Raiders fan, and one of the biggest prevailing narratives in certain parts of the Raiders subreddit is interim hires never work, and that's the concern for them with Antonio Pierce. The Quakes are in a similar situation now with their interim manager, but I feel like interim managers have slightly more success as of the soccer that I've followed, more so than football. I feel like, especially with someone like Ian Russell, he knows the organization very well. He's seen a lot of different transitions and changes and fluxes within the San Jose Earthquakes organization. I feel like in that sense, and being able to get the most out of his players, it's hard pressed to find someone that's going to do that more than Ian Russell, unless given a significant amount of time. But we do still have to keep in perspective that the roster itself is going to need some changes. I think it's still too early, especially off the back of a win, to go through the squad and think about, okay, which players are going to stay, which are going to go. And as we often do with those exercises, what you and I want to happen is completely different than what usually ends up happening, which is Occasionally, a whole lot of nothing. Lately, the Quakes have done slightly less nothing. They've done something, but not enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've yes, yeah,
I feel like I tongue tied myself there.
yeah. You're totally fine.
Yeah. But definitely, this group has earned the status of road warriors, at least for the time being. And I think that's important for any sort of competent team to get a win on the road, and not just to get a win on the road against another bad team, like to go. Albeit these are very intense atmospheres, sellout crowds in places like Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City, and or sorry, Overland Park, Kansas, or St. Louis City. Those away games are not easy in the sense of the crowd atmosphere, but in terms of those are the next two teams close to us on the table, and combined, those are the three teams that you can guarantee aren't making the playoffs. You can make an argument for anyone else in the West. But to beat Real Salt Lake, who still after the loss are in position to host a playoff game if the season ended today, that's a big road win. Before the game, what percentage chance would you given the Quakes to win this game? Maybe like 10%?
No, I mean, I think in any soccer game, any team should have at least 10% chance of winning if they can field 11 players. I think for me, it was more like 25. It is a competent professional soccer team, uh, but you have to consider the fact the likes of not Lucho, Chicho Arango, and the plethora of highly experienced MLS players that they have, as well as their new signings that they have coming through. You mentioned Hayden's tweets. He mentioned a tweet before the game that he actually felt bad for the Earthquakes because of how much things looked stacked against us uh, going into the game. They didn't have Diego Luna, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
they had a very strong team, nevertheless, and the Earthquakes are one of the worst teams in MLS. So I could see why he would have thought that. And even when I replied this in that tweet, even when we went 2-0 up, I didn't want to clap back because I was like, the Earthquake can still very much lose this, as we very often have this season.
Yeah.
So I the Earthquakes are an okay team, but definitely a surprise to win and to do it in that fashion as well.
A big time surprise, almost as big of a surprise as Diego Luna being left off the Olympic roster. I'm still pissed off about that. But I think we should get into the lineup that we saw Pablo Mastroeni line up with Real Salt Lake. So Zach McMath in goal, who you could argue maybe should have done better in that first goal that the Quakes
Mm.
scored. And then Boja Davis, Hidalgo, Justin Glad, Brian Vera, and Alex Catranas are their back line. Catranas has been a really good under the radar signing for us, for El Salt Lake, shoring up that left back spot. Then they had Emeka Anelli and Brian Ojeda of Nottingham Forest fame in their holding midfield spots. And I say that somewhat sarcastically because Ojeda was one of 50 players that have come in and out of Nottingham Forest in the last few years. Then Michael Chang on the right, Matt Crooks in the center attack midfield spot, new arrival Diogo Concalves on the left, who was probably one of the better players in this game, Christian Arango, who started the game, but he had to sub off due to a 42nd minute injury, I believe. Did you see what happened to Christian Arango? Why he had to be subbed off right before halftime?
Yeah, it was a tactical foul by Carlos Gruezo. He got a yellow for it. He kind of like jumped on his shoulder, and I guess the way that Arango fell, I don't know what he hurt. He hurt his like shoulder or something. It wasn't like the nastiest foul I've ever seen, but I saw that RSL fans were very upset about it. Rightfully so. In like their best player is now injured. Um, but yeah, it was a weird situation.
Yeah, so we wish him a speedy recovery. We hope Christian Arango's not out too long. He's integral for Real Salt Lake's MLS Cup hopes, and really hope that uh, it wasn't too serious because never want to see that. So
Oh, I
yeah,
do want to add, sorry, before you go on, that's most likely the reason they took him off was because of who they were facing. I think that if this was a match of any significance to them, or of more significance to them, they probably would have kept him on because it didn't look that bad. He continued to play for a few minutes after the initial collision. So with those things considered, I think that Arango will probably be okay, which I'm happy to say.
Yeah, that's great. He's one of our favorite players to watch in the Western Conference that aren't Quakes players, and I would have felt a little more confident had you been able to make it to halftime. Of course, it's never an ideal situation for a player to get injured, but because of the substitution window rules, if you can kind of soldier on until halftime, you don't have to use up one of those three valuable substitution windows for an injury, and that could really throw off the momentum. And the other subs that we saw, other than Anderson Julio, who replaced the injured Arango, another new acquisition for them, Javane Brown. He was formerly of Vancouver Whitecaps. He was a defensive substitution that came in. Nelson Palacio, Lachlan Brook, the Australian, also new arrival, and Benji Michel. And another player that they were missing that day, aside from Diego Luna, was another attacking midfielder in Pablo Ruiz. His estimated return is mid-September, so he'll be another big boost to Real Salt Lake. So it's no surprise to see why Real Salt Lake are in the top four in the Western Conference, right, Abram?
Yeah, like I said, they're a very strong team. I don't think people realize that because they're not in a crazy market like LA or Miami. But they taken their MLS season very seriously. They bolstered their team like incredibly, like probably one of the most meteoric rises in my opinion. Um, and I think at one point the commentary said when Arango went off and they were missing Diego Luna, they're missing Ruiz, and they had sold Fidel Barajas. They were like, yeah, they're missing 39 goal contributions right now. Like that's how crazy their season has kind of been. But I'm fully confident that they can turn this around. And the only reason I really care, to be honest, is because we our good friend at Royal Riot have been very nice to us, and so I don't want them to be sad, but usually I'm just like MLS is MLS, baby. Like what happens happens.
Yeah, and I will say Real Salt Lake are a very consistent organization. They were part of that group in betweeners. They weren't part of the original group from 1996, but they were one of the older expansion side. They were part of like Toronto. They were before Philadelphia and Seattle, off the top of my head, and they are an MLS Cup champion and they made a CONCACAF Champions League final. So there's only a handful of MLS teams that can say they've done both of those things. So fair play. They respect their organization. And I'll just skip ahead briefly to the Western Conference table. I won't go into too big of depth before we go into the Quakes lineup. But the Western Conference are currently in chunks. Like the top two are both LA teams. Third and fourth are the Rocky Mountain teams. Real Salt Lake in third and Colorado Rapids in fourth. Then fifth through seventh are the Cascadia trio, and then eighth through 10th are the Texas trio. So it's going to be very dicey and very interesting to watch which of those teams from those pairs and trios of rivalry get the better of each other. And hopefully, maybe the stars align that we get some of those matchups in the playoffs, Abram.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Yeah.
Totally
So
agree.
let's take a look at this Quakes team that got the job done. So Ian Russell went with the 4-2-3-1 formation. We had Daniel in goal, and he got a clean sheet. Benji Kikanovic, Daniel Muni, Rodriguez, and Vitor Costa are the back line. Jackson Ewell and Carlos Grezo, the holding midfielders. Espinoza on the right. Hernan on the center attack mid slot. Amal Pellegrino left and Yoseni Buddha starting up top. And that was probably one of the big stories because Jeremy Bobasi is out injured along with Carlos Acapo. We kind of know what the Quakes look like without Carlos Acapo in the right back slot, and Benji Kikanovic has done a phenomenal job there. But Yoseni Buddha, who was in and out of the squad this season, he had a brief loan spell away. What did you make of his performance?
Sorry, can you repeat the player? I was thinking about what you said about a capo.
Sorry, Useni Buddha. So he
Sonny Buddha.
started because Abobasi was injured.
Yeah, yeah. So Sonny Buddha, when Judd isn't there, he was missing due to yellow card accumulation, I believe. He's really the only one who. I mean, obviously, I would have preferred Benji at the striker spot, but Benji is the right back right now, and so Buddha stepped up. I think that he didn't do a bad job at all. I think that I think I have a higher expectation of him than most fans probably because of what I've seen him do for Quakes 2. I think that he's a phenomenal player when he feels confident, and I think that he kind of proved that he can hang, which is kind of like the baseline of what I needed from him. Because I feel like when he gets to the first team, he like kind of like feels too much pressure to prove himself and overextends himself, and that kind of won't uh, convert to good quality performances. But he showed his worth. He almost got a goal of the second goal. It was almost his goal. It came off the post, and then if Pellegrino wasn't there, he was like outstretching to get the rebound afterwards. And if he had a goal, that we'd be talking about his performance completely differently.
Buddha should have gotten an assist for that because pretty much his action led to
Right.
Pellegrino's goal. But technically, I guess the post got the assist.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but that's soccer, right? So
Mhm.
I would give him. I mean, I'm sure. Let me see what in your notes what he got. He got a 6.5. I probably would have given him about a 6.5, maybe like anywhere between a 6.3 to 6.5. I thought he was strong. He wasn't like incredibly impactful, but I thought that other players in different areas were, and they kind of like um, it was a really good attack. I think that thankfully we didn't need to rely on him too much when everyone else was kind of doing their job as well. So it was pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, and you also mentioned Benji Kikanovic. He's been playing so well at right back that this would have been the perfect game, at least late on, maybe the last 10 minutes or so, up 2-0, to sub on another Quakes 2 player of recent fame, Oscar Verhoeven. Uh, but he's playing so well that, like, why take him out? So, but at least he's getting on the bench. Another solid performance for Kikanovic, a clean sheet as well, and we'll talk about another player with a clean sheet shortly, but thoughts on Benji?
Sorry.
Thoughts on Benji Kikanovic? Do you feel
Oh,
like
thoughts on Benji?
Kapa's going to have to fight for his spot back? Because
Oh yeah, I
Kikanovic is
mean it's crazy because we have Paul Marie on the bench, we have Oscar Verhoeven, like you said, um, and but no, they're all snubbed for the left winger, and he's not even a left winger; he's a striker. Uh, you know, um, what's his name? The freaking manager, Ian Russell. He has said about Benji that he when he first met him at Tahoe or Reno, sorry, when he first met him at Reno, he thought that Benji was only destined to be a striker because he lacked defensive abilities, like he couldn't win the ball back, and he has really I guess under Lucci's system, gained more defensive responsibility from the wing, having to drop back and help pressure the ball in that way. But I guess he got so good at defending that he is now just a starting right back. And we'll see what happens when Akapo comes back. But we joked in the Discord that Benji must be pissed off right now because they're bringing off the left winger for the right back, the usual right back in Paul Marie, and he's still at right back. So it's not that we don't have space at the left wing. It's not that we don't have any more right backs. It's that Benji is the best right back we have. And if it, I want to see for the sake of Benji's career, I would love to see him play as a forward because that's obviously the more exciting role where he could like have more of an impact. But he's playing so good at right back that I kind of just like it's a mixed bag of feelings. So, but as long as he's playing there, I'm glad that he's playing well. So there's that.
Yeah, and I think Vitor Costa is relieved that he plays left back because otherwise Benji would be eating Vitor Costa's minutes. But
Right.
great to have Daniel back, and he's done so well, especially in the second half. He pulled on a blinder with save after save, and clean sheets are hard to come by for the San Jose Earthquakes this season. So he definitely deserved a clean sheet. What did you make of Daniel's performance?
I mean, look, we've we've had uh, quite a few games this season, maybe like over 30, maybe around 30. Um, and there's about three clean sheets in total to go around, including Open Cup and all that. Uh, Emmy has one, Emmy Ochoa. Yarbrough has one, maybe two. I think he only has one. And then Daniel with like three appearances, 3 or 4 appearances, already has one as well. So that kind of like shows his quality as a player that he only needed a few appearances to do so. A lot of it is due to the weakened attack. I don't say it's not a weak attack, but it was weakened by the lack of personnel that they have available, RSL. But he still showed why we have him. He's taken up an international slot, and you usually don't do that for a goalkeeper. We've talked about this a lot. When we first brought him in, we are like, why are we doing this? But now we're like, what are we going to do without him? You know what I mean? So definitely happy to have him back. Happy that he's healthy, first and foremost, because we got kind of a scare when he first came back. He got hurt in that Chivas game, and then he had to sit out the next few games. But he's here now, and he already has a clean sheet to his name. So yeah, big ups to Daniel.
So when you say you don't normally use an international slot on a goalkeeper, you mean the Quakes don't or MLS teams don't?
I mean, I can't speak for historically what has happened across the league, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a very telling situation when it happens, where when it happens, you have to be valued highly by the GM to use that slot. Obviously, you understand this. Like it's a valuable
Mm-hmm.
thing to have an international slot, and
Yes.
I think it's going for like 100,000 GAM right now.
Gotcha.
So that's that shows the faith that they have in this player when they brought him in, because we had JT Marcinkowski at the time, who was a very very strong keeper. So
Yeah.
it's just I just bring these stuff up to kind of emphasize how big of a deal it is that we have someone like Daniel, and what he could potentially mean for this club, because we don't have anything left to play for this season, but we're playing next season, guys. Like we have another season after this, so yeah, we'll see what happens.
Right. And I think that was an interesting point you made. I was just thinking back our history of goalkeepers. The two most successful ones before Daniel were both American, JT Marcinkowski and John Bush. And then before that, you
Joe
had the
Cannon.
Canadian Pat Onstead, and then oh yeah, Cannon of course. So yeah, three of those four were American. The other one was Canadian. At that time, Canadians counted as international roster spots besides Toronto, so that would have been a factor there. But
Can I
anyway,
say one thing?
yes.
Uh, Joe Cannon knows that we exist. So I was on an elevator ride, and it was just me and him, and he uh, uh, Ryan threw together a temporary media badge for me, and it said Tectonic. It didn't say Tectonic Takes. It just said Tectonic. And then Joe Cannon was like, What's Tectonic?" And then I explained to him that we do a podcast and all that. So yeah, that's just a cool tidbit to know that Joe Cannon knows we exist.
Yeah, Joe Cannon is a fantastic goalkeeper from his San Jose Earthquakes game and his MLS career as a whole. So that's true honor. And on the other side of the pitch, we had Christian Espinoza, who had a blinder today. He was creative. He was dictating play, dictating tempo. He got a goal. It was struck hard enough to force Zach McMath to, despite the contact, still let the ball go in. So I still think Espinoza, you'll definitely be proud of that goal. Obviously, they all count the same. What did you think of that goal? And we'll talk about Amal Pellegrino's goal after that.
I mean, I talk about this a lot, that the difference in culture from just like players from all around the world. South American culture is strike the ball, hit the ball at the goal, like a lot, and that's what happened. And we've seen that from Hernan Lopez. We've seen that from Espinosa multiple times. They come from the same league, so it's to be expected. But Zach McMath has to do better there. Like you use your leg, you use something. You can't let that go under you, man. Like it's crazy that that went in. But I'm not complaining, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see him keep striking the ball from wherever if it keeps going in.
Yeah. And I think with Pellegrino, we saw in the nature of the goal that he scored to make it 2-0. I think you have to just be a natural, instinctual finisher, if not poacher, to have that kind of goal scoring record that he did. You can debate how much of a step up MLS is compared to the Norwegian league, or if it is, because the Scandinavian clubs, at least the ones that qualify for Europe, tend to hold their own in European competition, at least, and qualifying in the group stage. But regardless, Pellegrino, he has an impressive resume, and while he's had some difficult periods this season, apparently that his goal that he scored made him the leading goal scorer with 6 this season, which again indicative of the type of season the Quakes are having. But Pellegrino is contributing.
Yeah, I mean, we had a whole debate about this in the server earlier today, where Pellegrino, like he's been a good player. I think that it's great that he's our best goal scorer in MLS, but there's been way more chances that he hasn't put in. I think that if you divide like the chances that he hasn't put in and give it to other strikers, like they would be considered to have a bad season as well. But I think that if he's scoring goals and you can't really do too much to what's it called? What's it called when you say something bad about a player? We'll cut this out.
Talk crap.
Yeah, you can't bash on him too much. I think that he has the instinct, like you said, Ivan. He has the pedigree as well. It's just kind of unfortunate in the season that he came in because I think that he's more effective than Cade Cowell at putting up numbers. So I'm happy that he's here, but you have to say it's kind of a disappointment when you saw like the number that he was putting up in Norway and seeing how that's converted to MLS play. But overall, I think that he's a positive on the team. It's just like the team has struggled. So I think that kind of his productivity or lack thereof of productivity has been a kind of a reflection of the team as a whole rather than himself as a player.
Right. And the only similarity those two leagues have with each other, Norway's top flight in MLS, is that they're a March through November league. Other than that, completely different style play, completely different teams, different ambitions, different climates, different schedule in terms of the way that they format their schedule. Obviously, the calendar wise is similar. So, yeah, it's tough to compare different leagues, and you do have to kind of reset expectations. I don't think we were expecting him to be a Golden Boot winner this season, but he has contributed to a strong extent, even if he has left some goals out there. The momentum shifted a lot in the second half. Do you recall there being a specific moment in that second half when you're like, Quakes are kind of coming out of this a little flat here, or is that how you felt? Maybe you felt differently.
I mean, yeah, I did definitely something shifted. We didn't have that fire that we had in the first half that allowed us to take the lead in the first place. I think the second half was we came more down to earth. We were in a stadium that was very against us, and that didn't take effect. I think until the second half because we took out Yule, we took out Hernan Lopez. Anytime you get rid of Lopez, the your whole team is going to shift and change. I don't think Nico did a bad job. That's not me saying that at all. I think that he had a pretty good game and was like one of the strongest attacking players on the field after Hernan left. Um, but we definitely went to a more defensive structure. We at one point took off Buddha for an extra center back in Beeson, I believe. Um, so yeah, you can't say that there wasn't a change between the two halves. I think that the first half we were definitely the aggressors and the clear protagonists, but the second half we were like trying to hold on to that clean sheet. And thanks to Daniel and a bunch of other good defensive performances, we were able to do so.
Yeah, it was very shocking. I'm trying to think about why sub out Lopez at halftime. End the hungry earn on hours early, if you will. The kids version of one of our Discord servers, our Discord channels. Um, my rationale would be it's a gamble, of course, especially on the road against a very good team. But where else are you going to rest Lopez this season? You want to see how well this team does as much as possible. So you're expecting if he's healthy, he's starting, he's playing. So maybe that was the case. And I'm sure he was expecting the Quakes would continue in that momentum at halftime. And it wasn't Nico's fault. It was just for whatever reason, they came out flat. And you do have to give Nico Shakiris his minutes too. His development is very important at this stage in his career. He's earned his minutes, and he's that exciting young player. He's only a year older than Verhoeven, but he's the player right now that's more focal to the first team starting 11 or one of those first guys off the bench. So it was great to see him get at least that full half, and it's only going to continue to help him as he tries to establish himself in this league.
No, I agree. I think it was definitely less of a tactical thing, more of a man management thing, more than anything else. Nico kind of been raring to get back into it, so yeah, I don't have a issue with it, but you, I think that every fan wants to see as much of Fernando Lopez play as they can, but that's not the reality of the sport. We have to maintain people and give a lot of players a chance, especially when you're having a season where nothing matters anymore. So you know,
Right. I think it is important. You do not want to necessarily run Hernan Lopez to the ground. You, someone could get injured playing 2 minutes, but that would be worst case scenario because then you're playing the waiting game, trying to figure out what the team's going to look like if he's not ready to start the next season too. So it's always a risk, but at the same time, there's still 9 MLS games left. You're going to play your guys as much as you can. And I think of the saves that Daniel had to make in that second half, it was about 70th minute. There's a lot of bodies around the box. The shot wasn't the most threatening or the most lethal, but Daniel had to stretch out really much full extension or close to his right hand side to palm it away. And I think that was very important because there's just so many moving pieces, so many players in and around the box that it makes life difficult for the keeper. But I think without Daniel playing to his usual high standards, not only do the Quakes concede at least one, they don't win, right?
yeah, yeah, no. With this team, anything can happen. So like we could be winning 2-0 in the 89th minute, and I would still be sweating. And that shot that you described, that's one of the scariest shots that you can face as a keeper. Just like because you should get to it, but with how it's like bouncing across the ground, all the factors involved, you're like, okay, I should, but like the big possibility that I'll fumble it, it might skip past me or whatever, and I'll look terrible. So all that shit, that all that stuff is going through your head, like in that split second where you're doing that dive, and if it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. So it shows his expertise and his experience as well to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, and so that's the game essentially. It was a tale of two halves, but the Road Warriors managed to hang on. They kept their lead, a 2 goal lead intact. They kept their clean sheet, which hold on to those because those are nuggets that you're not going to see too often, at least this season, it looks like, especially with 9 games to go. So clear player of the match for this one, Christian Espinoza, given Team of the Week honors from Major League Soccer. Do you agree with that, or would you like to nominate another player for player of the match?
I'll nominate Jackson Newell. I thought that he was integral to the first goal. He kept doing that thing where he was reading the play and getting interceptions high up the pitch. And I didn't see him step a foot wrong in terms of the build up and his usual things that we know Jackson Newell to do. So
He was locked in.
yeah, he was playing very well. When Jackson Newell's playing well, the whole team does well, and he's just that impactful for the team. But I think you're right, and Espinosa would ultimately edge him out. So I'm happy to give Espinosa the award for sure.
Yeah, I think Jackson Ewell. This is the player that, as a person, as a leader, yeah, I'll have him be my captain any day. Nothing but respect for Jackson Ewell for everything he's done for the Quakes for the last 5 years or so. As a player, though, he's been one of more inconsistent players during that span. And the highs are high, the lows are low. But I think that this season, I'm willing to say that he's had more good games than bad, even if there's also some mixed bag performances scattered in there.
Yeah, I think that I would argue I've always been a Jackson Yule defender. I'd argue that he's had a lot of mediocre performances, then a lot of like some bad ones, and then some good ones as well. So it's like all across the spectrum. But the thing is, when your team is performing so bad, the mediocre performances don't cut it, and they turn into bad performances just by proxy. Um, and that's just how it is. But I want to point out that before we go, I know we don't have time, but Jackson Yule, like a lot of people don't really see behind the scenes like we do, Ivan. He is a leader. He is someone who is vocal. You don't see that from him, on the pitch as much. I mean, he's yelling, he's being vocal, but we can't hear them. And when you look at Yule, you don't see like a Roy Keane type, So I think that he gets miscategorized as a weak leader. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that he's a very strong person, and I think that he had to step up to the role. He didn't ask for it; he was kind of given it when all the things changed. Who's gonna do better than Wondolowski? That's impossible shoes to fill. So yeah, it was always going to be hard, but he's doing it to the best of his abilities, and we commend that.
Jackson Yule kind of gives off that vibe. He's the soft spoken Midwest. Yeah, I'll have some soda pop kind of guy. But when he's really focused and when he's really driving that midfield and providing that instructions as a leader usually does, that's when the Minnesota Lumberjack comes out and he is as committed as anybody. And we see that kind of switch flip. He has a bit of a mean streak. He's given some harsh tackles, particularly in Cali Classicos against the Galaxy. But yeah, I think that he's an integral part to this team. And I think an integral part to the long term success of Quakes, we've already seen a few of these players crop up on the bench more and more. We got to talk about that penalty shootout win really briefly that the town had over Tacoma Defiance, Abram.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to watch too much of the game. I'm mostly upset because Lalo Blancas missed his first penalty ever as a professional player. Uh,
Oh, dang it.
he was at one point the best penalty taker in North America, which that's insane, right? He's incredible at set pieces and dead ball situations. So commiserations to Lalo Blancas if you're watching him. Definitely not, but he's a joy to watch. The game wasn't super eventful otherwise, but 2 points is very helpful when you're in a playoff run. So definitely take it.
Yep, it's very important. Right now, the town are still in that seventh and final playoff spot. The top seven of each conference qualify for the playoffs in MLS Next Pro. They're level on points with Whitecaps too. They're level on goal difference as well, also with Tacoma Defiance. So that is a really big win. So they're slightly closer to LAFC two in fourth than they are to the next closest non-playoff team. Uh, so still everything hanging on the balance, but it's all about development. It's all about getting those players minutes. And I'll just briefly mention that something to look out for in the Eastern Conference standings that there is only 2 points separating ninth place Atlanta United with dead last DC United. So all those Eastern Conference teams, they still have a shot at making the playoffs. All but Sporting Kansas City, St. Louis, and the Quakes, sadly, don't have a shot at making the Western Conference playoffs. But we could play spoiler for the team in 11th that is kind of on their last legs in their playoff hosts. Minnesota United, they are our opponents next at PayPal Park. They're coming off of a 3-2 loss to Seattle Sounders at home at Allianz Field. But you got to watch out for their new signing, Kelvin Yaboa. He is a Ghanaian born Italian attacker. They got him from Genoa, and he scored a brace, one from the penalty spot, one from open play in that 3-2 loss against the Sounders. And I think that they have a lot of pieces to be a more cohesive unit, especially attacking, and they usually are solid defensively with Dane St. Clair in goal. But I think that Seattle put three against them. Seattle are a better team than us, but we can take advantage of that. I think that this is a winnable game. We can get a winning streak going. That could be good for momentum. But I think Minnesota United are also going to be just as dangerous in terms of looking at this as an opportunity to get right game. Uh, what are your thoughts going into this, and do you want to give a score prediction, Abram?
I don't really like score predictions because I'm never right. I'm gonna do a percentage like you did with the match against RSL.
Higher than 10% this time, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would say 40%, 40 to
Okay.
45. I think that we have a good chance. I'm not confident that we'll win any against anyone, but 40% I feel is accurate for just how we performed and what we can do, but also what we can let them do. So yeah.
I have a feeling maybe it's because they had a 3-2 game in their last game, Minnesota United, but we had a pretty thrilling 3-2 win against them when the Quakes qualified for the playoffs that one season, thanks to Marcos Ureña's goals. Yeah, we got clapped by Vancouver Whitecaps in the first round. Let's forget about that part. Let's just focus on the task at hand. Let's hope for a cool 3-2 win against Minnesota United. It's great to be able to watch the San Jose Earthquakes and feel like they're a cohesive unit. They have a chance to win games. That wasn't the case earlier this season. So it was a pleasure talking to you about this win, Abram. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to plug before we head out?
No, I definitely check out the technology Discord. It's a very active, very fun place to talk and give out your thoughts. We have some very knowledgeable people in there. Ivan included, myself included, and sometimes that's the first place that news hits when we get it. So make sure to find that. Well, it'll be in the description. Yeah, check it out.
Yep. And be sure to check out my latest blogs. You can follow me on Twitter at Ivan Ornelas too. I'll also put a link on the description for my latest article where every week I post where are some games you should watch. It's more Europe focused, but I'll put some MLS games, USL games as well. I'm not always gonna put the Earthquakes games just because I want to show love to as many teams as possible, but that's some other content as well that you can have there. And in our Discord, we recently started our Fantasy Premier League. We had our draft for our Fantasy Football League. So if you want to get on that action for later this season for Premier League or next season for NFL, and as well as all the other fun shenanigans that are going on, we're trying to plan a pickup soccer game as well. Check it out on the Discord. You'll hear that news first. Abram, I'm sure you're more looking forward to pick up soccer than pick up basketball, right?
Well, when I'm playing against you, definitely. I can't. When Ivan gets near the rim, you just can't reach. It's physically impossible to stop him from putting it in the basket. When you're 5'10", it's just you can't do it. So yeah, I'll definitely be more looking forward to that because the ball's on the ground where I can reach it.
You're getting more confident as a scorer, though.
I
I
scored
see you
one.
improve each time you play.
Scored
Yeah, there
one.
you go. All you have to do is score at least one. That's my goal whenever we play basketball. As long as everyone scores once, everyone has fun, no one gets hurt. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for us today on the Tectonic Takes podcast. From Abram and I, we're wishing you a great rest of your day and go Quakes.
Go Quakes.